I was preparing for this, I'll have to tell you, I have a little apprehensiveness about this because normally when we do workshops for parents or seminars or things, I'm usually dealing with a how-to, how to help your child with homework, one of those practical hands-on type things. And this topic really isn't one of those. But in my opinion, it's so important because it provides a foundation from which I believe that we as the educators, parents, and teachers, okay, in the 21st century need to be aware of. It's foundational kind of topics that we're going to be sharing together today. So the format is this. I want to present some information to you, and then I want us to discuss it. So as I show you some things today, present some ideas. If you're a note taker, you might want to do that. Because afterwards, I want to get your thoughts on it. What do you think this means? What does it say to you? What would be the concerns? If everything continues the way it is, you know what I'm saying, what do we need to be aware of? So that's what we're going to be doing today. This is maybe going to provide a foundation or a scaffold that's a little bit different on which you'll build as you're working with your children. So here we go. Here we go. First thing I want to present to you is that a shift has occurred in the world. It isn't just that it's going to, or we're on the crest of maybe it'll happen, but a shift has occurred already in the world. And it's a matter of, this is not just simply a change. We're talking about something that's dramatic. The shift has been dramatic enough to create what we call a ripple effect. And the ripple effect, it's been significant enough that it goes out and it's impacting actually every area of our culture. It impacts the world as a whole. This shift has not only impacts us in the United States, but some of the things that we'll discuss you see in third world countries. It's impacting rich and poor, educated, uneducated, no matter what country they're in. And it's something that we need to be aware of, because it touches every areas of our lives, because it touches politics, economics, the church, business, everything. It's something we need to be aware of, because if we, the educators, parents, and teachers, are going to really prepare our children for the world that they're going to inherit, the world they're living in, we really need to understand this. Because the world that they are living in right now and the world they are going to inherit is very different from the world when I was growing up. And I'm older than you, and it's different than the world when you were growing up. What our children know and just live on a daily basis and experience things that are happening in the world today are very different than the kinds of things that were happening when I was growing up and when you were growing up. And because our responsibility is to prepare the generation to come, to prepare them for the future, we really need to be looking at what that future is and asking God, I would say it this way, asking God to give us a real fresh vision of what that is, because I don't think we can be preparing for the same kind of future we had. Now, some things remain constant, some things are the same, but many circumstances are different because of this shift. And that's my hope, is that I can do a fairly good job of helping you be aware of the things that the Lord has laid on my heart. It deserves our focus because it's changed the world. So if we're going to effectively guide our children, we need to be aware of this so that we can act instead of just reacting. That's the whole point of what we want to do. When you don't have a clear focus for things, no matter what you're trying to address, if you don't have a clear focus, then you make unwise decisions. You make poor choices, uninformed choices. And so in this particular topic, what I have found as a teacher and then as working with parents, if we don't have a clear focus on this, what we tend to do is our attention is focused on the present and what's happening right now. How situations, for example, in school are affecting our children right now. We're not seeing beyond that. How is it affecting us? Is it convenient? Isn't it convenient? Do I think this is good? Am I not ready for this? How is it affecting me right now? It keeps us focused on the present. And when we do this, our tendency, particularly in our society, I'm not sure about other societies, but I know in our society, our tendency is to do this. We spend our time focusing on preparing the road ahead for our children. In other words, because of our frame of reference, we are anticipating, you know what I'm saying, what's going to happen, going ahead, filling in the potholes, ironing out the rough places, trying to do everything so that they can move through their experiences, whether that's they're a 4-year-old, move through those experiences, or a 5th grader, easily. I don't want them to encounter difficulty. I want them to, you know, have a good life, have fun, those types of things. And when our focus is on the present, we are busy. We will be busy. Keeps us busy. I think it gives us the impression many times, or we feel as though I'm really watching out for my children, doing those things for them that are good. But what happens many times is it's frequently, the best case scenario, I think, is that it's unproductive or in many ways unhelpful for children. And extreme cases are it's actually disastrous for some. And what we find, the term we use in education a lot, is we get children in our classes who have what we call a learned helplessness. They come to us with not bad attitudes, not negative attitudes at all. We're not talking about rebellion. We're not talking about disobedience and those things. But it's a helplessness because of the experiences that they've had and the experiences they do not have. What happens to them and what doesn't. Because we as parents, and lots of times, particularly mothers, our society has convinced mothers that our job is to go in ahead of our children and smooth it all out, make it right, and keep everybody happy, type of thing. And so that's where we focus our attention. A clear understanding of the present, but with an eye to the future, I think, is going to change our focus. And you only act and react in conjunction with what you believe right now. All you can teach is who you are and what you know. You will live, teach, model, make your plans based on what you believe, what you think, what's important to you. What we see coming out of you is actually what you believe. We might talk about some things, but unless it becomes a part of us, that's not what we actually teach. So if we don't have an idea of what the future is, that's not going to impact our current resolve. And so therefore, it's not going to show up in what we do with our children. You have a good understanding of the present with a clear eye to the future. I think you're going to shift your attention from preparing the road ahead for your child to preparing your child for the road ahead. There's a big difference between those two. And it just has to do with the major, what the root of the concern is. See, if I'm preparing the road ahead for my child, then I'm anticipating their needs and working, to prevent certain things. If I'm preparing them for the road ahead, then I'm teaching them to anticipate. I'm teaching them to solve problems. If I'm preparing the road, then I'm ironing out the rough spots. If I'm preparing them for the road, they're learning how to navigate the rough spots. If I'm preparing the road for them, then I'm orchestrating circumstances for their benefit. And if I'm preparing them, then they're learning to manage circumstances. So it's an entirely different focus, and it causes you to have different expectations. It causes you to have different policies and rules at times. It causes you to treat situations differently. If what I'm saying to myself is, what is she learning from this? What is he learning from this that he'll teach to his children? That's preparing them for the road ahead. In Psalms, it talks about training the generation to come. And it also talks about, in Proverbs, that the wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. That means we in this generation are affecting not only our children, but the generation to come. How do you do that? You impact the generation to come by what this generation learns. So as I'm dealing with situations with children, one of the things I need to be asking myself is, what is he learning from this that he'll teach to his children? Not just, how do we get through this circumstance? How do we get through this situation? But what are they going to learn from this that they'll teach to their children? That's the perspective of, I want to prepare them for the road ahead. I don't have any idea what all the challenges are going to be that they will face, what the world will be like that they will face. So my focus isn't so much on just like making this world work. It is preparing you for whatever is ahead and for what God has for you that's ahead. So shifting our focus from preparing our children, or the road for our children, to preparing them for the road. In years past, in previous generations, we probably would have had this kind of discussion with parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers. You know, they're getting ready to take that next big step, and so let's prepare them for this, and let's sit down and have a talk about courses they should take and things of that nature. But the shift has made it so that that is not a wise thing to do anymore. If we're not starting back with children when they're younger, much younger, they don't have a strong foundation. And so the whole point of the matter is that the shift is requiring new skills, new habits, new attitudes, new knowledge, different skills, different habits, different attitudes, different knowledge. And teaching these things has to begin early. And I'm not talking about middle schoolers are now going to take high school courses and elementaries. No, we're not talking about that type of thing. It does have more to do with certain skills and habits and attitudes that are the foundation than it does with other things. Last night, I modified my PowerPoint here because I thought, there is one area in our culture where we get this concept. We get this whole concept of you have to start with them when they're young, and it's in sports. Mm-hmm. Nobody thinks you're going to prepare somebody to be a major league pitcher by kind of starting with them the first year they're in college. Most people who are major league pitchers were in Little League. People practiced with them. No pain, no gain. That's our thing in sports. But when it comes to other things, somehow it doesn't sink in, You need to start those things early. There are attitudes. There's a discipline that's required to become a major league pitcher. There's a discipline in that. There are attitudes that young man develops. There are skills that young man develops through the perspective of looking at this thing in the future. So, this shift has made it so that we really have to focus our attention on what we're doing with children when they are younger. One other thing I'd present to you is that in previous generations, and this is what the shift has created, in previous generations, if you could read and write, if you had a college degree or the specialist or whatever, you went out in the world, you found your place, you could be productive. You had work to do. You could minister. You could help. You could do whatever. Okay? So in previous generations, the illiterate were those who couldn't read and write. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they couldn't speak, they couldn't, do this type of thing. But the shift has altered this. Reading and writing and speaking are still important. Understanding math concepts are still important. Getting a college degree is, in most cases, still that stepping stone to go into that place that God has for you. But the shift has created this. It's not enough anymore. It isn't enough. There is just an assumption that you will be able to read and write, that you will be able to do these kinds of things. Okay? So what has happened is this. This is a quote, or it's a modification of a quote by a man by the name of Alvin Toffler. Alvin, I think it is, Toffler. Not that I agree with everything with him, but I think the statement is true. What we're seeing and what's happening, the illiterate of the 21st century aren't going to be those who cannot learn, who cannot read and write. It will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, the fact of the matter is, to be able to learn, in most cases, you have to be able to read. Do you know what I'm saying? You have to be able to have those skills. So, see, there's just an assumption here that this exists. The illiterate of the 21st century are those that can't take what they've learned, unlearn, modify, change, and then relearn. Flexibility, adaptability, all those types of things, huge. So much so that they are skills that our students we need to be laying the foundation so they can do these things. There is more than one answer many times to a question, or there is more than one way to find the answer. There's always, there are some things that there's always just only one answer. God says this and that's it. Then there are a lot of other circumstances. Well, no, this will work in this circumstance, and this works in this situation, and the students need to be able to discern which is which. The students need to be able to, this isn't working, so, okay, well, no, wait a minute, I've got to figure out what to do here. How do I adjust? And pull in knowledge and pull in information and be able to make a change if in their world they're going to be productive. In their world today, one of the things that's so different that impacts even what we have in our curriculum is the whole concept of knowledge. What do we need to be teaching to the students? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was in the 5th grade, we studied the United States, U.S. histories, and we still do U.S. history in 5th grade, all right? But when I was growing up, big project was learning the capitals of every state in the United States. And it was huge. We spent a lot of time. I had a puzzle that I put together, and that's how I learned the capitals of the states and everything. See, you, on your phone, can access the names of the capitals of the states of the United States. So one of the things that's happened is, well, what then is the knowledge? What are the things that our students need to learn? What facts, what information do they really need to know? Because much of it is easily accessible to them. So should I really be spending my time teaching those things, or should I be teaching them some other things that they can't access? They can't do. Now, some of that information, we still teach because it's a foundation for something else. But the shift has caused us to even change the types of things we need to present to our children in the classroom. So, if this is true, that the illiterate of the 21st century are those who need to be able to learn, yes, but then unlearn and relearn. Think about that. What does that mean with regard to the skills that children need, the way they need to think, what their brain needs to be doing? What are some of the things that are required? You've learned something, but now you have to unlearn and relearn. What are some of the things that are required to be able to do that? Just think about it for a second. For anybody, not just for a child, for anybody. What would you think? What are some of the things that are required? What do you have to be able to do? This is where you can participate.
You said to unlearn and relearn.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a humility that's required first, particularly if you're an adult
Yeah.
and you're past
Right.
what you think of as the stage of school learning.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it could be just even in a daily life situation, the humility, or at least the awareness and the ability to say, oh, yeah, I'm missing something here. I need to, I wasn't exactly right. I wasn't totally right. So humility could be part of it. What else, though?
That has strong problem-solving skills. Just the ability to take something and mess with it until they figure it out.
Mm-hmm. You have to be able to solve a problem. And the nature of a problem is we don't know what the solution is right away, so we have to work with this. What else does it require?
Be able to look past all the things that don't matter and hone in on the distraction.
Mm-hmm. Right. And just be able to hone in. Okay, those things are out there, but wait a minute, what's the focus? What's the focus? Where are we going? What's important here? Being able to answer the question that's really being asked, that type of thing. Anything else?
I was thinking right along the same lines of problem solving, where you've got to be able to not just think linear, this. You've got to get outside the box. You've got to find different possible solutions.
Right. Mm-hmm. And a part of that is it requires analysis, where you're breaking this thing apart, and then part of it requires the synthesis of going to something else that I haven't even thought of before. Those are real skills that are huge for this generation. Huge for this generation. Okay, so moving right along. The big question is then, what caused the shift? In your mind, what do you think caused the shift that has occurred? Does anybody have an idea? Or I just share with you my thoughts?
The amount of technology we have.
Most definitely. The whole idea that the knowledge is so easily accessible. was spurred on by technology. And that's part of the reason why the shift is happening around the world. I was in the Philippines in April, had forgotten what it was like to be outside the United States. It'd been a long time since I'd been outside the United States. And wow, yeah. Okay, I remember it. Everybody has a phone. Everybody has a phone. And most of them had phones, even the little guys riding bicycles, carrying people, they even had phones that had, where they could access Google. They could access the internet. So technology is one. What else?
Postmodern thought that there isn't just one answer to everything.
Okay. The postmodern philosophy thinking. What else?
What about the influx of other cultures into America?
Right.
You bring a lot of different processes when you bring in such a variety of other cultures.
And 9/11 also was a catalyst for us that moved us into the world in a sort of waking up the sleeping giant kind of thing. Moved us into the world in a way that we never had been before that time. Changing economies are part of this. Changing politics are a part of this. It's not any one thing in isolation. It's as it's all come together. And it has created a world that your children are living in right now, but moving into that's very different than your world. Do you understand that if you have a child who's younger than 10, they've always lived in a world where they've always lived in a country where there is an element of fear that did not exist when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. Did not exist. And it has to have an impact. Now, the biggest scary thing when I was growing up, I'll tell you how old I am, but, I was raised in Florida, and Russia came to Cuba. Cuban Missile Crisis, that type of thing. And they were like 90 miles away. 90 miles away. And so everybody in Florida built an underground bomb shelter. And that's when I discovered that Twinkies will be here in the millennium. You just can't get rid. I mean, they don't ever rot. It's just very scary. So that was the scariest thing for me. But even that wasn't as scary as what I hear from some of our students. And we're on orange. There's an orange alert, and this has happened, and there's a bombing, and No, most traumatic thing that happened in my life before I was an adult was Kennedy was shot. And it's one of those things, where were you when Kennedy was shot? Well, you weren't even born. But some of you weren't even born. But for these guys, it's when the terrorist attack, when 9/11 happened. It's very different. Your children, this is not, I don't know that significant, but most of you, your children never even seen a blackboard. They've just seen whiteboards.
Use a regular phone.
Yeah, a regular phone. So their world is very different. Now, we think those things aren't necessarily life-changing. But if you understand that it goes out into every area of life, just think about how things have changed in church, how things have changed in thinking in our country, and what's accepted and what isn't accepted. So the world is different, and the question we have to ask is, how does this extrapolate out to the future? So the last part of what I want to present to you before we have a discussion is some of the characteristics of this new time and of our children's world. What are some of these characteristics, okay? One of them is constant change. Their world is a world of constant change. In our country, constant change, rapid pace, very complex. Listen to this statistic. The U.S. Department estimates that today's learner will have 10 to 14 jobs, not careers, but 10 to 14 jobs before they're 40. I was counting last night. In my years, I've only had, I think, 13 or 14 jobs in my whole life. I mean, I went back to when I was in high school and waited tables at Jack's Barbecue, kind of thing. 10 to 14 jobs before they're 40. That's the estimate. We're currently preparing children. Think of the weight of this. We're currently preparing students for jobs that don't even exist. They don't even exist yet. And technology and globalization are increasing the pace of the change. And when change comes, if you don't pay attention to it and then adjust, do you know what I'm saying? Adjust doesn't mean get rid of all your beliefs. And no, that's not what we mean. But understand the change and adjust to it and make it work, then you become irrelevant. You do. You become a non-force in their lives. And then they're not prepared. So, one thing is this constant change that they're living with. Next one, knowledge is easily accessible. And we've kind of mentioned this. Google has more than 31 billion searches a month. Billion searches a month. It's just like right there. It's just right there. In our classes here, we now have little iTouches that the kids are going to be using, and this is part of it, just to get them very familiar with, well, how do you find that? You know, go and get that answer. Don't slow down the process of solving your problem because you don't know this fact or that fact. Go and find it. It's like right there. That's what wise people do. You go out and get the answer, so I can do this other thing, so I can solve the problem. Next characteristic, live in a global society. And there's a lot that goes with that business being a global society. One is, there are more markets, but there's also more competition. China will soon be the #1 English-speaking country in the world. Will soon be the #1 English-speaking country in the world. Another statistic that I got off of Google, was, now think about this. Think of all the children in China. All right, all the children in China, that's this, not China, excuse me, India. That's this group right here. And from that group, you take those students with the highest IQ. It's this group right here. From that group, you take 25% of them, 1/4 of them. Those students in that 1/4, the number of those students is more children than we have in the United States. 25% of the highest IQ students in India, children in India. 25% of them. Not everybody in India. Not the highest IQ. 25% of it's more children than we have in the United States. And we also have a population that, and not, IQ isn't everything. It's just a statistic, all right? It's one thing to think about. 10 years ago, I was doing workshops on the decline and fall of excellence, showing that anytime our students in the United States are matched against the rest of the world, our average students usually score in the bottom 10%. Our AP students are dead last. Not our Ben Lippin, but, United States. Kind of scary, isn't it? And this is a global society. The people they're going to be working with and their competition and what's happening is global. And we're not yet even talking about the spiritual implications of this. This is the world. Because God has created, the one thing that hasn't changed is they were knit together in their mother's womb to be exactly the way they are for the purpose that God has for them. But the purpose that God has for them is in the world in which they are living and the world they are inheriting. It's in that world that He has a place for them. And He wants them to articulate and lead and fulfill His purpose for them. That's what He has for them. Their world is just different than our world right now. Okay? Next. Opportunities are very different. Couple little facts. The top 10 in-demand jobs in 2010 didn't even exist in 2004. The top 10 in-demand jobs. Now, there's a lot of jobs that have just been around since George Washington was here, They're done differently today. But the top 10 in-demand jobs, we've seen a shift. You know what I'm saying? If it can be replicated, if it can be computerized, it will go to Asia to be produced. And so you look at how economies have changed in the United States and, what we do and what the jobs that are available and the places to work and the places to serve and the places to lead. It's different. It's very different. Opportunities are different. So, from the business side and just from where is God going to place them, the question is, well, what is the sellable skill? What is the sellable skill? And what we're coming to, it's not so much that you know the answers to the questions anymore, it's that you know the questions to ask. Why don't you need to know the answers to the questions? Because for so much of it, it's just accessible. And you can get it there. But knowing the questions to ask, knowing how to apply that, knowing how to use that information. Then finally, we can't read that. No heritage of Christianity. As a people or as a nation, we are in a position where, when I was growing up, it wasn't that everybody believed in God, but everybody in where I was growing up in Central Florida, they all believed in the same God. They knew He was there, and they just chose to disobey willingly. My generation, peace, all that. They just chose. No, I don't want to be fenced in. I don't want this. I don't want that. But your children are growing up in a world, in this country. Not the mission field is here. Do you know what I'm saying? It is here. Because there are people within a 10-mile radius of this building who don't believe in Jehovah. And they'll see your children at Walmart and, that type of thing could be involved with them in things if you're outside this community here of Ben Lippen School. That's just the norm now. And my question is, are they prepared for it? If we're going to do everything exactly the way I did it when I was growing up, if we continue to do the same things, do you think we're going to have a different outcome? Maybe not. Probably not. How intense are we? Do your children, does this generation really know who God is? Not just kind of know about Him. The concern for me is we have children who don't know the nature and character of God. They really don't. My generation was taught that. We don't do that anymore. I mean, United States, not Ben Lippen School. But I'd say to you, what are you doing in your home? You are their primary educator, not us. Not us. We're partners with you. But you're the main educators. Do they understand what it means that God doesn't change, that He is unchangeable? Do they know what it means that He's eternal? Do they know what it means that He is all-wise? Do they even know He is? Now, the pat answer for anything when you ask a question in class is, and they're not really sure the who or the whatever, they'll just say, God? It's like, that sounds like a good answer for everything. But they don't really understand what that means. And when you're 4, of course you don't. But there are things that our 5th graders could and should understand. And we're desperate for them to know those things. Because if the foundation isn't being laid right now, they're going to be missing stuff when they're in 10th grade and when they're in Dale Angstad's senior Bible class, and he's trying to help them pull it all together so that you're applying it, that you understand it deeply. The foundation has to be here, has to be started here with them and now with them. Okay, so this is my question to you. What is needed? Oh, good. As you think about what we talked about, what it takes to be literate, 21st century, the changes that are here, as you're trying to anticipate, well, what will their world be like? This is our question. What is needed? What are the important things? And what is needed for our children? So I want you to think about it for a second. What does this make you think of as I say all these things to you? What comes to your mind? There's no right or wrong answer here. This is a discussion. This is application of the information. I really don't want us to get together and just have me present some stuff and have some cool pictures from the internet or whatever. That's meaningless. If any truth that's a part of what we're doing doesn't settle down in you and make a difference in how you do things, it's a waste of our time. It's poor stewardship of your time and my time and our resources. So let's think about it for a minute. Okay, anybody? What is needed? What does this make you think of? Whatever.
It makes me think of their need to be able to handle stress better than we were taught how to handle stress.
Yes.
Because the degree of change, the speed of change, all these different things, it adds stress level to kids.
Most definitely. This generation, well, and you feel it. Computers are supposed to make our lives easier. Trust me, my life is not easier because of this computer. It is busier. And I can be accessed just like this with a 3-page, single-spaced email. You know, I'm thinking somebody has way too much time on their hands. But 3-page, single-spaced email, and I need to be able to respond to that. You get those. And then we go here and here and here. The level of activity, the rapidness of the change and everything, that is the norm for them. And right now, you're kind of covering and protecting some of that. But then, they step to that next level of development. And finally, they're out from us, from high school, and they're in college. And, wow, it just starts coming on them, the stress, the pressure that's going to come in there. I agree with you. I don't know how they're going to deal with that. If they're not learning, they have to learn to prioritize what's important and what isn't important.
Well, it seemed like to me that it's never been more important that kids understand that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and that the one constant is the nature and character of God. And it doesn't suffice just that they can give the right answers about God, but it's that they have had this experience that has taught them that the nature and character of God is constant. Exactly. That's the only thing that won't change.
Because their world is constant change. Constant change. And but no, God doesn't. He is the same yesterday, today, forever. He is the same. He does not change.
And they need to know why they believe. Not that it's just some rote belief that they have. But why do they believe that?
And that's the place, too, where the family and the school merge together. There are a limited number of experiences that we can give them that go to why. How do you understand the why when you live through it somehow in your life? When your grandma dies. When your mom loses a job or your dad loses their job. When somebody is ill. And we walk with them through that, recognizing that before the world began, God knew about this. Before you were even born, before your grandmother was even born, God knew about today. And this is perfect. It's as we walk through it without any of those kind of experiences, they don't learn that. But going through that experience does not ensure that they understand the why. They could be learning something else. They're always learning. Always learning. The question is, what are they learning that they'll teach to their children? Because it settles down in them.